Welcome to SurroTalks, a weekly podcast where Kevin, a father of two through surrogacy, and Petra, a former IVF nurse and fertility consultant, unwrap all the aspects of your egg donation and surrogacy journey. Join us every week to discuss various topics around surrogacy and egg donation. On episode 1, we're going to talk about initial process starting your egg donation and surrogacy journey.
Well, I'm really excited that we're here today. We've been talking about this for quite a while. For anybody that's just joining us and who's not too familiar with who we are, my name is Kevin Healy. I'm a father of two children that were born through surrogacy and egg donation. We started our journeys about 10 years ago. We did one journey through an agency and one independently. I'm also an officer of the board for a charity called Fertility Friends Foundation, and the objective of our organization is to remove the financial barriers around fertility treatment. So if you want more information about that, please follow us at Fertility Friends Foundation or send me a message, and I'm happy to send you more information about that. And Petra was actually our wonderful nurse when we went through our two journeys 10 years ago.
Yeah,
and we've kept in touch, and I'll let her introduce herself a little bit so that you get to know her a little.
Yeah. So as Kevin explained, I am a former nurse at a fertility clinic where I specialized in egg donation and surrogacy. That seems like a lifetime ago now, over 10 years ago that I began that career. And I now am on the other side of things at an agency where I am able to consult with families and help guide you through your journey from start to finish. I've also just really enjoyed being somebody to, who you can come to ask questions and get some advice on your surrogacy and egg donation journeys. I've been an egg donor a few times and I'm a mom too. So, I'm really excited to join Kevin on this new journey to kind of unpack the surrogacy and egg donation world.
Yeah, we started talking about this about 2 years ago. And we felt that there was a bit of a need out there to have streamlined information about surrogacy. I've attended a lot of sessions over the years, and I know other people have as well, where they go to an hour and a half session about surrogacy, and there's just so much information all at once. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. So hopefully, we'll be able to break down the process into bite-sized conversations, dive in a little bit deeper on each one of those topics. And so, Petra, do you want to talk a little bit about the episodes that we've planned so far?
Yeah. So we're going to be hosting this every Monday at noon. And so today we're just going to do a brief overview on what you can expect through your egg donation and surrogacy journey. Next week, we're going to dive into egg donation. The following week, surrogacy. And on both of those weeks, we're going to talk about choosing your egg donor, choosing your surrogate, what the process looks like. And then following that, we're going to have special guests join us to talk about the legal aspects, counseling, and, maintaining your mental health during this process, the financial piece. We want to have a surrogate on here who you can listen to and see their perspective, meeting a family who's gone through the process, meeting a doctor. So we're really excited to have a bunch of guests join us on this journey and learn all about it.
Yeah, and it's really a work in progress, right? So I
Yep.
think we're looking for feedback from people. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, send us a message, and we're going to try and shape this, based on how this initial episode goes and on the feedback that we get from people going forward.
Yeah. So on that note, please send us your questions. Let us know what you want to hear about. I think today we're not going to answer questions, but we're going to be giving you lots of opportunities to send those questions in to us as well.
Absolutely. So maybe do we want to start a little bit with kind of the providers and what kind of parties people going through surrogacy are going to be interacting with?
Yeah, so you're going to have there's going to be three main providers that you're going to look at, possibly four, depending on what you need for yourself. So the three main ones are going to be your clinic, your agency, and your legal team. And then the fourth is going to be your support system, which can be, everybody can have a different type of support system, which we'll dive into as well. So clinic is very important. You know, you want to choose an IVF center that you're comfortable with. That might be a clinic that's located close to you, or maybe one that you've researched and feel comfortable with moving forward with. You're going to have your agency, unless you'd like to move forward independently, which has its own kind of journey and tips and different aspects that you'll need to consider, which Kevin will have a lot of experience on. And then your legal team. It's really, really important, even if you're going independently, to have a legal team. So you will have a lawyer as well as your egg donor and surrogate. And then your support team, family, friends, a counselor. This can look different for everybody, but it is really important to have that team behind you to help you navigate this.
Yeah, and the way I looked at it when we were going through it was you really have to build your support network and a team that's going to vouch for you. You know, whether it was, in our case, Michelle Flowerday, who was our lawyer, and we could ask her questions, and if we hit a roadblock, she would have different suggestions. You were great as we were going through the process. I remember, you know, we went through an anonymous donor, and I remember the day we were all in the building, you know, making these babies, and you came up to me and you said, guys, you could not have picked a better donor. Like, her personality was incredible. She was so outgoing. And I remember you just validating the information that we went on just based on, you know, a profile. And it was so great to have you validate, you know, that for us.
You're gonna bring me to tears.
No, but I remember that moment really vividly, and it just, you know, you go through these experiences having to trust so many people along the way,
Yeah.
and making sure you have a team that is there for you in good times and in tough times, because, you know, surrogacy is not an easy process to go through. Just like any pregnancy, there's ups and downs.
Yeah.
And so I think you really want to make sure that the people that are going to be around you on this journey, because it really is an incredible one, is one that you feel comfortable with, and you can open up about, you know, your concerns. And yeah, it's a really important part of the process.
Yeah, you bring up a really valid point, Kevin, in that, you know, you have to put your faith into so many people throughout this journey. And so it's really important that your team is composed of people that you trust and you can rely on, and you can feel comfortable asking questions, and that you're going to get, you know, honest and truthful answers back. And you're going to have, you know, people who are rooting for you. So I think that's such a huge part of this, and it's really difficult to go through this alone. If, you know, maybe if you're a single parent going through all of this, that's a lot on your shoulders. And so it's really good to have that team behind you and rooting you on, and, you know, people that you can trust to get in more information from, or whatever it might be, that will help you mentally get through all of this.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to open up about your family goals with friends and family, right? If you know people that have gone through surrogacy, ask them who they worked with, ask them what the relationship was like, what was their experience, what are the lessons learned they had from that. Because I think a lot of people, whether it's a traditional hetero couple going through infertility or an LGBTQ plus couple, they both come with challenges. And unfortunately, I think there's often a stigma of shame or being overwhelmed and not knowing how to go about it. The more those conversations are normalized, I think the easier it will become for couples and um, anyone going through that kind of journey.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think, some people definitely, especially if you've had a difficult journey, some people might feel a bit more private and not sharing with certain, family members or friends. And there are lots of support groups also available. So a lot of clinics have support groups. A lot of counselors and fertility coaches also run support groups, so you can still create that team behind you, even if it might not be the people you already know now. It might be people that you meet along the way.
Yeah, that's great advice. Can you give us a brief overview around surrogacy in Canada and how it might differ from the US?
Yeah, so the main difference between US and Canada are the laws in place regarding compensation versus reimbursement. So in Canada, the laws dictate that we cannot compensate surrogates like they're being paid for a job. And this applies to egg donors as well. So Canadian surrogates and egg donors can only receive a reimbursement for their appropriate expenses related to their surrogacy and their pregnancy. Whereas in the United States, surrogates can be compensated for their surrogacy journey. And usually this is in a form of a monthly payment that's agreed upon at the beginning of the journey. Otherwise, the process between the United States and Canada is going to be very, very similar up until the birth. Only difference there is a lot of states do a lot of the legal paperwork before the baby is born, whereas in Canada, all of that is done after the baby is born. But otherwise, process-wise, it's going to be very similar. So in 2 weeks, when we talk about the surrogacy journey in detail, it will most of it will apply to both countries, which is great.
And in fairness, even in Canada, laws are different from one province to the next, right?
Yep. Yeah. So the different provinces that have legislation regarding the parentage aspect of the surrogacy will differ whether they are a court process or more of an administrative process in terms of getting the parents' names on the birth certificate. And I'll let our legal expert dive into that when we have her on with us in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Okay, so if a couple is at a stage where they want to start the process and, let's say they found a surrogate already, how in agreement of working together, how do you take that next step then from, agreeing that you're going to work as a team to actually going through the surrogacy process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's no one place to start. You might start with your clinic, you might start with an agency, or you might start with a lawyer that you already know and trust. But really the first step is going to be choosing that clinic, whether it's a recommendation from the other two providers or a recommendation maybe from your family doctor, or just from doing research online. But your first step is really going to be meeting with your doctor and making a plan to create embryos through IVF. And once you've done that, then everything else can fall into place. It's really important that you go through that medical process first, and then you can, line up with your surrogate.
From your experience working in a clinic, would you have patients meeting with different doctors at that clinic or different doctors across different clinics? Do you remember that?
Typically, not within the clinic. When we would start with a client, typically they would have one doctor that they would fulfill their journey with. But certainly from the agency side, I do see clients who are maybe, I don't like the word or the phrase, but shopping around to see which doctor and clinic they feel most comfortable with. And I think that's totally reasonable to do that and find the provider that you like to work with the most. One thing I will say around that is that not every doctor will provide those consultations for free. So if you are in Ontario, you will have to have a referral from your family doctor in order to have your consultation with your specialist covered under OHIP. But your family doctor may not want to send referrals to multiple clinics at a time. And so you might expect that if you're kind of interviewing various doctors, that they might charge a fee for that consultation.
Great. Okay. And so once you settled with the doctor and you want to move forward, so what process would a couple be looking at this stage?
Yeah, so when you get started with your fertility journey at the IVF clinic, the first thing that they're going to do is a workup. So this will include blood work, for females, ultrasounds, for males, sperm analysis, and then possibly a physical assessment or various physical testing to see what the plan needs to be in order to create embryos. So this will look different from patient to patient, of course, but generally what you can expect is a lot of blood work. The blood work will be in part infectious diseases to follow the Health Canada requirements, as well as hormones and other testing to make sure that you're in good general health. And then from there, if you are moving forward with an egg donor, then you're kind of going to be waiting until you've chosen your egg donor to move forward into the next step for the medical process.
Great. And I guess as part of that too, as a couple going through the process, there usually is a psych evaluation, if I recall correctly.
Yes. Oh, yes. Good point. So as part of the Health Canada requirements, all parties involved are going to require a counseling session with a counselor to discuss the various psychosocial aspects of the fertility journey. So this might be done with your clinic early on in the process. Some clinics do have their counselors in-house, and then some clinics will give you a list of counselors to choose from who you can then book an appointment with. And then your egg donor or surrogate will also complete that same counseling, although for them, it'll also include an assessment to make sure that they are able to be your egg donor or surrogate.
Yeah, I remember a lot of anxiety going to that initial meeting, thinking, well, why is it that we need to be assessed as to whether or not we'll be fit parents? But I walked away from that meeting thinking this was another person on our team that if we had questions about anything around the process, even later on having kids, I feel like it was a person that I could reach out to and say, look, how should we handle with this situation? And so in the end, even though initially you might have this feeling around what is it that they're going to assess,
Yeah.
I actually think it's a really good consultation to take on.
Yeah, and I like calling it a consultation or just a counseling session rather than an evaluation, because really that's what it is. They're going to ask you a lot of questions that will make you stop and think and consider all of the different aspects of this journey from the psychosocial side, the emotional side, and how you're going to navigate those things. And like you said, Kevin, that person might end up being part of your team long term. A lot of those counselors will, be able to offer you guidance throughout your journey. They might also have like the support groups, like I mentioned. So it's really nice if you find somebody who you have a good fit with. They'll be like your therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of egg donation, you selected an egg donor. What are the steps, kind of high level, that one would expect from there?
Yeah, so once you select your egg donor, and we'll go through that whole process on its own day on how to choose your egg donor. But once you choose your egg donor and you match with her, I like to break it down into a 3-step process. So it's kind of easy to remember. So there's going to be screening, legal, and then the IVF cycle. So screening will involve your egg donor having tests done ordered by your IVF doctor to assess her fertility and her health and make sure that she can be a match with you. This process might take about 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the clinic and depending on what type of testing is done. Second step is going to be the legal process. Now, not every egg donor match has a legal agreement. In Canada, if it is an anonymous donation, it's not actually required. But if it is a known ID donation, then it is required. If you want my opinion on this, I think it's always important to consult a lawyer about it. And most lawyers will recommend to have an agreement in place regardless. But that process can take a few weeks just to outline the relationship between parents and egg donor. And then once that's done, then you can focus on planning the IVF cycle. So this will be the stimulation cycle, where the egg donor is going to be taking injections and preparing for her eggs to be retrieved with your clinic. She's going to be having multiple appointments over a 2-week period in order to retrieve the eggs at the end and then fertilize with the sperm. And that's going to be the IVF part of it.
When things get interesting.
Yeah. And we could talk for hours about all of that, but we just wanted to give you kind of a high level overview of what those steps are, and then we can further break it down next week.
Yeah, perfect. And same thing about surrogacy. So say you've agreed to a surrogate, what would be the high level process around that?
Yeah, so it'll be very similar in the steps outlined. So we're going to have the screening, legal, the embryo transfer, and then the pregnancy. So screening is going to be very similar to the egg donor screening, except instead of assessing her ovaries and assessing her egg production, they're going to be assessing her uterus and her ability to carry a baby, along with all the other Health Canada requirements and testing to make sure that she's healthy. I did forget to mention, we kind of said it before, but they will also have counseling, of course, as part of that screening process. In terms of how long that will take, probably just a few weeks for those results to get back. And I should note as well that surrogates partners are also going to be screened for infectious diseases during this process. So if she's married or is in a committed relationship, then that person will also undergo the Health Canada screening. Once that's all done, then we move into legal. Legal agreement's going to take a bit longer than the egg donor agreement. This one is absolutely a requirement. It's really important that you have your surrogacy agreement with your surrogate. And it's quite long. I don't know if you remember, Kevin, they're probably about 40 to 50 pages long. So there's a lot to go through there and make sure that everybody agrees on all of the different clauses in the agreement. So this one takes a little bit longer. And then after that's done, then we can start preparing for the embryo transfer. Hopefully she gets pregnant the first try. And then after that, it'll continue very much like any normal pregnancy will.
Yeah. One of the things I remember, and I've seen as couples go through their surrogacy journeys, is I think people choose surrogacy thinking that they're going to have much more control over the process. So I think one thing to remember is you can't control it all. At the end of the day, nature takes over, and as great as science can be, you know, life is a bit of a miracle, and you can try and plan for all of these aspects, but at the end of the day, you just have to go through the motions and see where that journey takes you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good kind of expectation to have that not everything is going to run perfectly. You might and probably will have some hiccups along the way. And it's, it might be important for you to ask questions about that when you're meeting with all your different providers so that you might have a better idea of what to be prepared for. And as well as your agency so that you can even know what those, added costs might look like if things don't go as planned. And we'll definitely talk about all of that as well. But yeah, I think it's a good expectation to have that we're going through all this process, you might have some hiccups along the way. Maybe a test comes back not ideal and you have to treat something that wasn't expected, or maybe the first embryo transfer doesn't work and you need to try again. These are all things that your team and your village behind you can help you navigate.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it for our first episode. We've covered everything we wanted to cover. As we mentioned earlier, we're not going to take Q&A questions today, but if you have any questions around surrogacy, egg donation, all these different aspects that we're going to be talking about, please send us a message, and we'll be happy to answer them as we go forward.
Absolutely. And we'll be posting this on our accounts as well. So if you want to share with a friend who might be preparing for their surrogacy journey, please do so. And hopefully they can follow along as well. And Kevin, I'm going to be seeing you on Saturday at the Fertility Friends Run too. So maybe if we have anybody here who wants to join us, we both have teams going to support this amazing charity too.
Absolutely. And for a bit of background, so this is our first fundraiser for 2023. All of the proceeds from this event go to our spring 2023 applicants. Currently, the application platform is open for new applicants. So if you are in the midst of surrogacy or considering surrogacy in the near future, please check out fertilityfriendsfoundation.com. See if you are eligible for one of our grants. And if you can join us on Saturday, please join us. It'll be great.
Yay. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody who joined us today. And we're really, really excited to be launching this and hope to see you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Petra. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye-bye.